Hello friends, my wife, Claire, and I have been together for 7 years, married for 4. She was everything I thought I wanted: beautiful, confident, outgoing. The kind of person who could charm an entire room the second she walked in. I was always more reserved, more logical. We balanced each other out, or at least, I thought we did. Looking back, maybe I was just blind to who she really was. The first few years of our marriage were good. Not perfect, but solid. We had the normal ups and downs, but I never doubted her loyalty. Claire wasn't the overly affectionate type, but I figured that was just her personality. Then, things started changing, little things at first. She started spending more time on her phone, laughing at messages she wouldn't share with me. When I asked, she'd roll her eyes and say, "Just a friend from work, nothing you'd care about." She started going out more. Girls' nights, work outings, excuses that didn't quite add up. When I asked why she never invited me, she'd sigh and say, "You wouldn't have fun, it's not your scene." But the biggest change, she started acting different around my half-brother, Jake. Now, let me explain. Jake and I were never close. We share the same dad, but we grew up in completely different households. He was always the golden boy, the one who got all the attention, the one my father actually seemed proud of. I always felt like I was in his shadow. But Claire, she seemed a little too interested in him. At first, I thought she was just trying to be polite, to make an effort to connect with my family. But then I noticed the way she laughed at his dumb jokes, the way she touched his arm when she spoke to him, the way her entire face lit up when he walked into a room. That I told myself I was being paranoid. That I was just imagining things, but deep down, something felt off, and what I would eventually find out, it would destroy everything that I tried to ignore. The feeling that I told myself I was just being paranoid, that I was reading too much into things. Claire had always been friendly, outgoing. It was one of the things that drew me to her in the first place. Maybe she was just making an effort with Jake because she knew how complicated my relationship with him was, but the more I told myself that, the more it didn't sit right. Claire had never gone out of her way to bond with anyone in my family before. She was always polite, sure, but distant. She never seemed that invested. But with Jake, it was different. She'd bring him up in conversation constantly. "Jake's so funny, isn't he? Jake was telling me about this new place in town, we should all go sometime. Jake said the funniest thing today, oh my gosh." Every time she said his name, my stomach twisted a little more. Then there were the physical signs. Whenever we were at family gatherings, I started noticing how she positioned herself near him. If we were sitting around talking, she'd find a way to sit next to him, to lean in closer than necessary. If we were all standing around, she'd angle her body toward him, like she was more focused on him than on anyone else in the room. I started testing it. I'd move across the room at events, just to see what she would do. Without fail, within minutes, she'd migrate back toward Jake. That's when I knew that I wasn't imagining this, something was happening. One night, things escalated. Claire had been getting dressed up more often, putting in more effort for nights out than she ever did for date nights with me. That night, she was heading out again. Another one of her work outings. I had started keeping track of how often she went out, and this was the 4th time that month. She stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her dress, and I finally asked, "Who's going to be there?" She barely looked at me. "Just the usual group." Something in me snapped. "Is Jake going?" Her hand froze on her necklace for just a second. Just enough for me to notice. Then she scoffed. "Why would he be there? He doesn't even work with me." But here's the thing, that I never said it was a work event. She realized it too late. Her face twitched, just for a second, before she covered it up with fake annoyance. "God, you're being ridiculous." That was it. That I had enough. That I didn't say anything else. I just sat back and watched her leave, my mind racing. And that was the night I decided to finally get proof that I didn't have to wait long. The next day, I had an early shift at work, but something told me to check her phone before I left. Claire had never been overly secretive with it before, but lately, she had been glued to it. She always took it to the bathroom with her. Always kept it face down. That morning, she was still asleep when I got up. Her phone was on the nightstand. I hesitated, then I picked it up that I wasn't even expecting to find anything, not really. I figured she'd be careful, but I was wrong. The moment I opened her messages, my entire world collapsed. There they were, hundreds of messages between Claire and Jake, flirty, personal, intimate. Messages that no married woman should ever be sending to another man, especially her husband's half-brother. My hands were shaking as I scrolled. Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about it. I wish we didn't have to hide this. I hate sneaking around, but I don't want to hurt him. That last one made me want to laugh. She didn't want to hurt me, she had already destroyed me, and the worst part, Jake was just as into it as she was. I know, but we have to be careful. He can't find out. I want you so bad right now. It's risky, but that's what makes it fun, right? Fun. They were risking my entire marriage and calling it fun that I couldn't breathe. My chest felt tight, my vision blurred. I had seen enough that I put the phone back exactly where I found it and walked out of the house, not even knowing where I was going, because at that moment, I knew that everything I had believed about my life, my marriage, my own family, had been a lie. That I left the house that morning without a plan, just a head full of rage and a heart that felt like it had been torn apart. I didn't go to work. I didn't call anyone. I just drove, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white, replaying every message I had just read over and over again. Claire and Jake. My own wife and my own half-brother. I wanted to believe I had misunderstood, that there was some explanation, but there wasn't. The messages were clear. They had been sneaking around for months, and the worst part? They had no intention of stopping. That I parked at a random lot and sat there, staring at my phone, debating what to do next. Should I call her? Should I text him? Should I storm back into the house and throw her out? My mind was racing so fast I couldn't think straight, and that's when I knew I needed to confront them, face to face, where neither of them could run or twist the truth. And I needed to do it tonight. That I went back home like nothing had happened. Acted normal, played dumb, didn't let on that I knew. Claire was already home, lounging on the couch, phone in hand like always. She barely looked up when I walked in. "Hey, how was work?" she asked, like she wasn't hiding the biggest betrayal of my life right in her texts. I forced a smile, muttered something about it being fine, and went to take a shower, trying to calm myself down. I needed her to think everything was okay. That evening, I made sure we had plans with my family. Nothing big, just a casual dinner at my mom's house. I told Claire about it, and of course, she agreed because she knew Jake would be there. That was the whole point. I wanted them both in the same room, where they couldn't escape, where I could watch them squirm. The moment we walked in, I felt it. The way Claire's eyes immediately found Jake. The way his entire face changed when he saw her. They thought they were being subtle, but now that I knew the truth, every little thing was obvious. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when he spoke. The way he avoided looking at me directly, like he was already guilty. It made my blood boil, but I held it in, waiting for the perfect moment. That we all sat down for dinner, making small talk, but I barely heard any of it. My mind was on fire, my heart pounding as I waited. And then, when there was a lull in conversation, I cleared my throat and looked directly at Claire. "So," I said, my voice steady. "How long have you and Jake been sneaking around behind my back?" The room froze. Claire's fork clattered against her plate, her face going pale. Jake's head snapped up, his eyes wide like a deer caught in headlights. My mom looked between the three of us, completely confused. "What are you talking about?" Claire stammered, forcing a nervous laugh. "That's insane." I pulled out my phone, opened the screenshots I had taken that morning, and tossed it on the table. "Really? Because your messages say otherwise." Silence, absolute, deafening silence. Claire's hands started shaking as she reached for the phone, scanning the messages, her mouth opening and closing like she was searching for an excuse. Jake looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. My mom, who had been watching in horror, grabbed the phone and read a few lines before slamming it down. "Are you kidding me?" she snapped at Jake, her voice shaking with anger. "Tell me this isn't real." Jake finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. It's not what it looks like." That was the moment I snapped. I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. "Don't you dare say that." "I read everything. I know exactly what it is. You've been lying to my face, both of you, for months. While I was sitting at home like an idiot, Claire was sneaking off to be with you. My own brother. And you? You were supposed to be my family." Claire's eyes filled with fake tears as she shook her head. "It wasn't serious. It was a mistake." A mistake?" I laughed bitterly. "Hundreds of texts. Secret meetups. Talking about how much you wish you didn't have to hide it. That's not a mistake, Claire. That's a choice. And you made it over and over again." Jake was still sitting there, staring at his plate, completely useless, while my mom looked ready to throw him out of the house herself. Claire tried again, her voice desperate now. "I never meant to hurt you." "But you did," I said coldly. "And now, you get to live with that." I turned to my mom, who was watching everything unfold with tears in her eyes. "I'm done with both of them." And with that, I grabbed my phone, walked out of the house, and left them to deal with the disaster they created. That was the last time I ever looked at Claire as my wife. I walked out of my mom's house that night and didn't look back. I got in my car, started the engine, and just sat there for a minute, gripping the steering wheel, trying to process everything. My heart was racing, my hands were shaking, and my whole body felt like it was buzzing with adrenaline. I had done it. I had exposed them. I had watched their faces crumble under the weight of their own guilt, had seen my mother's disappointment, had heard Claire's desperate excuses and Jake's pathetic silence, but instead of feeling relieved, all I felt was empty. I thought that moment would bring some kind of satisfaction, that seeing them squirm would make me feel better, but all I felt was the cold realization that everything I had built, my marriage, my family, was gone. That I didn't go home. I couldn't. The thought of walking into that house, into the space Claire and I had shared, made my stomach turn. So I drove. I didn't know where I was going, didn't care. I just needed to be anywhere but there. Eventually, I ended up at my best friend Mark's place. The second he opened the door and saw my face, he knew something was wrong. I didn't even have to say anything, he just stepped aside and let me in. I sat on his couch, staring at the floor, while he handed me a beer and waited for me to talk. When I finally told him, his reaction was exactly what I needed. No sympathy, no empty words. Just pure, unfiltered rage. "Are you kidding me?" he yelled, pacing the living room. "Your own brother? That's disgusting. What kind of person does that?" Hearing someone else say it out loud made it feel more real. I had spent so much time trapped in my own head, questioning everything, that I almost forgot this wasn't normal. This wasn't some minor relationship issue. This was betrayal on a level I never thought possible. Mark shook his head, running a hand through his hair. "So what now?" That was the big question, wasn't it? What now? I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that I couldn't stay in that house with Claire, pretending like things could ever be the same. That night, I crashed on Mark's couch, but I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Claire's face when she realized she was caught. The way she had the nerve to cry like she was the victim. The way Jake had refused to look me in the eye. Morning, I knew what I had to do. The first thing I did was call a lawyer. I didn't even give myself time to second-guess it. Claire had destroyed our marriage, there was nothing left to save. While I was on the phone setting up a meeting, Claire started texting me. I ignored the first few messages, but they kept coming. "Can we please talk? You just walked out, and I don't even know what to do. I never wanted this to happen, I swear." I didn't respond. Then, the call started. After the third one, I picked up, just to get it over with. The second I answered, she burst into tears. "Please," she sobbed, "just talk to me. I made a mistake, but I love you." I almost laughed. Love? Was that what she called it? Because from where I was standing, it sure looked a lot more like betrayal. "You don't love me," I said flatly. "If you did, you wouldn't have done this." "It wasn't serious," she insisted. "It was just, don't finish that sentence," I cut her off. "I saw the messages, Claire. It was plenty serious." Silence, then, she switched tactics. "You can't just walk away from everything we built," she said, her voice lower now, calculated. "You're really going to throw away our marriage just like that?" And that's when it hit me, she wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry she got caught. "I'm not the one who threw it away," I said. "You did that the second you decided my half-brother was more important than our marriage." She started crying again, but I didn't stick around to listen. I hung up and blocked her number. A few hours later, my phone buzzed again, this time, from an unknown number. I had a feeling I knew who it was, and sure enough, when I picked up, I heard Jake's voice. "Hey, man," he said, his voice hesitant. I think we need to talk." I almost hung up right then and there, but something in me wanted to hear what kind of excuse he'd come up with. "You have nothing to say that I want to hear," I told him. "Look, I know I messed up, okay," he said quickly, like he was rushing to get ahead of the conversation. "I didn't mean for this to happen." That was the second time I had heard that excuse today, and it was just as pathetic coming from him. "So what, you tripped and fell into my wife?" I snapped. That he sighed. "It wasn't like that. We never planned it, it just happened." I gripped my phone so tightly I thought I might crush it. "Nothing just happens, Jake. You made a choice. Over and over again. And now, you get to live with it." He was quiet for a second, then muttered, "I didn't want to hurt you." I let out a bitter laugh. "Well, you did. So congratulations." I didn't wait for his response. I hung up and blocked his number too. By the end of that day, I had done everything I needed to do to start over. I filed for divorce. I blocked both of them from my life. I made it clear to my family that I wanted nothing to do with Jake ever again, and most importantly, I let go, because as much as this hurt, as much as I wanted to scream and break things and make them suffer, I realized something. The best revenge wasn't ruining their lives. It was moving on with mine, and that's exactly what I was going to do. The hardest part about betrayal isn't the anger. It's not the shock, not the pain of knowing that the people closest to you are capable of stabbing you in the back. It's the emptiness that comes afterward, when the adrenaline fades, when the rage settles, when the dust clears and you realize that you're standing in the ruins of a life that doesn't exist anymore. That's where I was. The day after I filed for divorce, I woke up in my best friend Mark's guest room, staring at the ceiling, feeling nothing. No sadness, no relief, just nothing. Claire was out of my life. I had blocked her. I had blocked Jake. I had cut them out like a disease, and yet, somehow, I still felt infected, because the memories don't disappear just because you want them to. Everywhere I looked, I saw her, the house we picked together. The couch where we spent lazy Sundays watching movies. The stupid coffee mugs we bought on our honeymoon because we thought it would be cute to have matching ones. It was all poisoned now. I needed a reset. A full one. The first thing I did was move out. There was no way I was staying in that house, not for another second. It wasn't my home anymore. It was just a place filled with ghosts, with echoes of conversations that used to mean something. I hired movers that same day, packed up my things, and left. I left our bed because I didn't want to sleep in it ever again. I left our furniture because I didn't want anything we picked together. I left every single reminder of Claire behind because I wanted to make it clear I was done. And as I locked the door for the last time, I felt something I hadn't felt in days, relief. Of course, Claire didn't take being ignored very well. Even though I blocked her number, she found other ways to get to me. She emailed me, she tried messaging me on social media, she even showed up at my mom's house looking for me, and when I still didn't respond, she sent one final message through a mutual friend. A long, pathetic, manipulative paragraph about how she never meant for this to happen, how she still loves me, and how she hopes I can forgive her someday. I read it once, then deleted it, because Claire didn't love me, she loved the security I gave her. She loved the life we built, the stability, the way I always put her first. She loved what I provided, not me, and now that I was gone, she was grasping for something to hold on to, but she lost that chance the second she chose my own brother over me. A week later, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, and when I checked it, I wasn't surprised to hear Jake's voice. He sounded nervous, guilty, pathetic. "Man, I know I messed up. I swear, I didn't plan for this to happen. I hate that we're not brothers anymore." That last part made me laugh. Not brothers anymore? Like that's something he just suddenly realized. We were never real brothers, not in the way that mattered. Brothers don't betray each other. They don't steal from each other. They don't destroy their own family for some cheap, meaningless thrill. I deleted the voicemail without responding because Jake was dead to me. For the first time in years, I was completely free. No Claire. No Jake. No fake relationships built on lies, just me. I moved into a new apartment, completely mine. No shared space, no old memories clinging to the walls. Just a blank slate, a fresh start. And let me tell you, there is nothing better than walking into a home that is yours alone. I focused on myself for the first time in a long time. I started hitting the gym, not for revenge, not to win the breakup, but because it made me feel good. I reconnected with friends who I hadn't seen as much because I had been too busy fixing my marriage. I threw myself into work, focusing on my goals instead of wasting time worrying about someone who never valued me in the first place, and slowly but surely, I started feeling like myself again. A few weeks after I moved out, I got a text from a mutual friend. "Hey man, just thought you'd want to know Claire and Jake are done. She dumped him." I actually laughed out loud when I read it. Of course she dumped him. Jake wasn't some great love story. He was a temporary escape for her. Something exciting, something forbidden, something she could justify in her twisted mind as different from our marriage. But once reality set in, once she realized that the thrill was gone and she was left with the actual person that Jake was, she wanted out. And now, she had nothing. No husband. No lover. No future with either of us. She ruined her entire life, and for what? I didn't even feel sorry for her. I just felt done. This whole situation should have broken me. It should have left me bitter, angry, unwilling to trust anyone ever again, but instead, it set me free. I no longer waste time on people who don't deserve me. I no longer ignore red flags just because I don't want to believe the truth. I no longer let anyone have control over my happiness except for me. And let me tell you something, the best revenge is moving on. Claire thought she could cheat and still keep her comfortable life. Jake thought he could betray me and still have a family to run back to. But now, they're both alone, and me, I'm finally free. I used to think that healing after betrayal was some long, dramatic journey, full of emotional breakdowns, late-night regrets, and some deep, life-changing realization that would magically make everything okay. Turns out, it's actually a series of small, quiet moments where you realize, little by little, that you don't care anymore. That was what was happening to me. Every day, the anger faded a little more. Every day, I spent less time thinking about Claire and Jake and more time focusing on my own life. Every day, I felt lighter, and then one day, I woke up and realized I felt nothing for them at all. I had completely cut Claire off. No contact. No messages. No acknowledgement that she even existed anymore. Apparently, that didn't sit well with her. After she dumped Jake, she tried one last move to get back into my life. It started with emails. "I miss you. I don't expect you to forgive me, but can we just talk? I still love you." I ignored them. Then she tried social media. I had already blocked her, so she resorted to making fake accounts just to message me. Each time, I blocked and moved on, and then, she showed up. I was coming home from the gym one evening when I saw her standing outside my apartment building, arms crossed, looking like she was about to break into some grand, dramatic speech. I didn't even hesitate. I walked right past her. She called after me. Can't you just listen? I stopped at the door, turned around, and looked at her. Why? I asked. So you can lie again? She opened her mouth to respond, but I was already walking inside, and that was the moment I realized I was completely over her, because the old me? The me from months ago? Would have wanted to hear her out. Would have wanted to understand why she did it, but now, I didn't care. Not long after Claire's failed attempt at talking, Jake decided it was his turn. I got another voicemail from an unknown number. I already knew who it was. Hey, man, Jake started, sounding awkward and nervous. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I screwed up. I should have never. I deleted the voicemail halfway through, because here's the thing, Jake wasn't sorry that he was sorry he got caught, that he was sorry his life fell apart, that he was sorry that Claire threw him away like trash, but he wasn't sorry for what he did to me, because if he was, he never would have done it in the first place. That I never called him back. Never acknowledged the message, because as far as I was concerned, he was a stranger. For the first time in years, I felt like my life was actually mine again, that I didn't have to deal with Claire's constant need for attention, that I didn't have to compete with Jake's golden boy status in the family, that I didn't have to waste energy holding together something that was already broken. Instead, I started living for me. I traveled to places I had always wanted to go but never did because Claire always had some excuse. That I focused on my health, hit the gym regularly, and felt stronger than I ever had before. That I made new friends, built new relationships, and surrounded myself with real, loyal people. And the biggest change, I started dating again. At first, I was hesitant. I didn't want to jump into anything too soon, didn't want to carry the baggage of my past into something new, but then I met someone different, someone kind. Someone honest. Someone who didn't make me feel like I had to prove my worth every second of the day. And for the first time in a long time, I knew what it was like to be with someone who actually deserved me. The last thing I ever heard about Claire and Jake, they both ended up alone. Claire tried dating again, but her reputation followed her. Once people found out she had cheated on her husband with his own brother, they saw her for exactly what she was. Jake tried to go back to his perfect life, but our family never forgave him. Even the people who once thought he was the favorite son wanted nothing to do with him. They destroyed everything for a relationship that didn't even last, and now, they were stuck with nothing. Meanwhile, I was out there, living my best life, without them. If you take anything from my story, let it be this: you don't have to get revenge, you don't have to fight them, you don't have to make them suffer, you don't have to prove anything. The best revenge is moving on, and that's exactly what I did. At some point, you stop waiting for closure, you stop expecting an apology that will never come, you stop replaying the past in your head, trying to make sense of something that never will, you stop feeling the need to tell your side of the story because, in the end, the truth speaks for itself. That's where I was now. For the longest time, this whole situation, Claire, Jake, the betrayal, was something I carried with me every day. It followed me like a shadow, affecting the way I saw people, the way I approached relationships, the way I even thought about myself. But then something changed. One morning, I woke up, made a cup of coffee, sat on my balcony, and realized I felt nothing about them anymore. No anger. No sadness. No desire to check up on what they were doing. They were just gone, and that was real closure. Of course, just because I had moved on didn't mean Claire was done trying. Not long after her failed attempt to corner me outside my apartment, she tried one last time. This time, she sent a letter. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the best of me. I figured if she went through the trouble of handwriting something, it had to be important. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. It was exactly what I expected: self-pity, manipulation, and zero real accountability. I still think about you all the time. I wish we could go back to the way things were. I made a mistake, but we had something special. Doesn't that count for anything? And my personal favorite: I know I hurt you, but I miss the way you used to look at me. That one actually made me laugh, because that's all Claire cared about, not the pain she caused. Not the damage she did. Just the fact that I no longer saw her the way I once did. I didn't respond. I shredded the letter and threw it in the trash, because Claire wasn't part of my life anymore. Unlike Claire, Jake never tried to contact me again after his half-hearted voicemail. I think even he knew there was no coming back from this. From what I heard through family, he tried to rebuild his life, but no one in our circle wanted anything to do with him. Even the people who once favored him saw him for what he was: a selfish, backstabbing coward. One of my cousins told me he had moved to a different city to start over. Good, because he was already dead to me. With every day that passed, my life became more mine, that I had my own space, free of old memories and ghosts from the past, that I had a solid group of friends who actually cared about me, that I had a career that was thriving because I could finally focus on it without the stress of a failing marriage, and most importantly, I was happy. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again, and yes, I had started dating again. Slowly, on my own terms, with no rush to fill some void, because the biggest lesson I learned from all of this: you don't need someone else to complete you, you don't need to be in a relationship to feel whole, and once you realize that, you stop settling for less than you deserve. That I used to think the worst thing in life was being cheated on, that the pain of betrayal was something you could never really recover from, but I was wrong. The worst thing in life is wasting time on people who don't value you. Claire and Jake thought they could steal my happiness, but they didn't. They only stole the version of me that tolerated them, and the person I became after losing them, that person was stronger than ever. This will be my last update, because Claire and Jake are nothing to me now. They are just a lesson, a reminder of what I will never allow in my life again. And if you take anything from my story, let it be this: you don't need revenge, you don't need closure from a liar, you don't need them to regret it. The only thing you need is to move forward, and when you finally do, you win. Moving on wasn't a single moment. It wasn't some dramatic epiphany or a sudden wave of relief that washed over me all at once. It was gradual, slow, like peeling off layers of something toxic that had been stuck to me for years. At first, I thought about them constantly. Not because I missed them, but because my brain couldn't stop replaying the betrayal. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Claire sneaking around, Jake laughing behind my back. It wasn't just about losing my wife, it was about losing trust, losing family, losing the life I thought I had. But the more I focused on myself, the less space they took up in my mind. It started with small things. I stopped checking mutual friends' social media, stopped wondering if Claire had tried to reach out in some new, pathetic way. I stopped caring about where Jake had run off to. I stopped waiting for the anger to go away and just let myself feel whatever I needed to feel. And then one day, I realized I hadn't thought about them at all. Of course, life has a way of throwing reminders at you just when you least expect it. A few weeks after I shredded Claire's letter, she pulled one final move. She showed up at my workplace. I had just finished a meeting when my coworker poked her head into my office. There's someone here to see you." The second she said that, I knew. Sure enough, I walked out to the lobby, and there she was, Claire, standing there, looking nervous, like she actually thought this was a good idea. I almost turned around and walked back into my office, but part of me was curious. What excuse could she possibly have left? She opened her mouth, but I cut her off before she could even start. "You have 1 minute. Say whatever you came here to say and then leave." She blinked, clearly not expecting me to be so blunt. Then she started talking. I don't know how we ended up like this. I made a mistake, but I never meant to hurt you. Do you really never want to see me again?" I let her finish, then I just stared at her for a second before saying, "Claire, you destroyed everything. And now you're standing here, asking me if I want to see you again? What exactly do you expect me to say?" Her face fell, like she actually thought there was some world where I'd forgive her. I shook my head. "Go home, Claire. It's over. It's been over." And with that, I walked away. She never showed up again. While Claire was out embarrassing herself in my workplace, Jake was dealing with his own downfall. Apparently, word about what he did had spread further than he expected. Some of his old friends dropped him completely. A few guys he worked with made it clear that they had zero respect for him. It turns out, people don't really want to associate with someone who betrays their own family. Last I heard, he moved out of state, probably hoping that distance would let him escape the mess he made. But the thing about betrayal, you carry it with you. No matter where he went, he would always be the guy who stabbed his own brother in the back. And me? I didn't care because his life was no longer my concern. It's been months since I cut them both off, and every day, I feel lighter. I no longer feel like I'm walking around with a weight on my chest. I no longer wake up and think about what they did to me. I no longer feel like I need answers. I have my own life and now. A new place that feels like home, because it's mine. A new routine that isn't dictated by someone else's needs. A new sense of freedom that I never knew I was missing. And yeah, I've started dating again, not because I needed to replace Claire. Not because I wanted to prove anything. But because I finally felt ready. And the difference, this time, I know exactly what I will and will not tolerate, because once you go through something like this, you never let yourself settle for anything less than what you deserve. It's funny how betrayal changes you. At first, it makes you feel like you'll never be able to trust again, like you'll always be looking over your shoulder, waiting for the next knife to land. But over time, it does something else. It sharpens you. It makes you stronger, more aware, more certain of what you will and will not tolerate. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I had cut Claire and Jake out of my life completely. I didn't check up on them, didn't ask mutual friends about them, didn't waste a single second caring about their misery. Because I knew, without a doubt, that they were suffering in ways they never expected, and me, I was building a future where they didn't exist at all. After Claire showed up at my work, I thought she had finally gotten the message. That she'd finally accepted that she wasn't a part of my life anymore. I was wrong. A few weeks after our last interaction, she sent one last email. This time, it was pure, unfiltered anger. I can't believe you're acting like I never meant anything to you. You're making me out to be some monster when you weren't even a perfect husband. You're just running away because you don't know how to handle real problems. That last line actually made me laugh. I didn't know how to handle real problems. Claire cheated on me with my own brother. I wasn't running away. I was getting rid of a toxic, selfish liar who thought she could manipulate her way back into my life. I didn't respond, because nothing I said would change who she was, and the best revenge was letting her spiral on her own. While Claire was melting down, Jake was learning the hard way that betrayal has long-term consequences. One of my cousins told me that after he moved out of state, he tried to rebuild his life but no one respected him. His old friends didn't want anything to do with him. He had trouble finding steady work because people knew what he had done. He tried dating, but it turns out, I cheated with my brother's wife. Isn't a great selling point. Karma had finally caught up to him, and the best part, I wasn't around to see it, because his life wasn't my problem anymore. For the first time in years, I was fully in control of my own happiness. I had moved cities, leaving behind any trace of the life I had with Claire. I had built new friendships, surrounding myself with people who actually respected me. I had thrown myself into my passions, rediscovering things I had put on hold because I was too busy trying to hold together a failing marriage. And yeah, I had started dating again. At first, I was cautious. I wasn't about to jump into something just to fill the empty space Claire left behind. But the more I put myself out there, the more I realized not every woman is like her. There are actually people out there who know what loyalty means, and now, I finally understood what I deserved. Betrayal feels like the end of the world when you're in it. It feels like you'll never be the same, like you'll always be the person who was cheated on, like you'll never be able to trust another person again. But the truth? You don't just survive it, you come out stronger. You learn who actually deserves to be in your life. You learn how to spot the red flags you ignored before. You learn that real love isn't something you have to beg for. Claire and Jake thought they could ruin me, but all they did was set me free. And now, I was never looking back. A year ago, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd never recover from the betrayal. I thought I'd always be the guy whose wife cheated on him with his own brother, that it would define me forever, that I'd carry that pain with me for the rest of my life. But today, I barely even remember them. Claire, Jake, the betrayal. It's all just a past life that no longer has any hold on me. This is the last time I will ever talk about them. Because their story ended the second I walked away, and mine was just beginning. The last thing I ever heard about Claire: she's miserable, she tried dating again, but it turns out, being known as the woman who cheated with her husband's brother isn't exactly attractive. Every new relationship fell apart quickly. Nobody wanted to commit to someone with her history. She burned every bridge. Friends who once defended her eventually saw her for who she was and cut her off. She tried to reach out to my family, but they wanted nothing to do with her. She made her choice. She thought she could destroy me and still walk away with a happy life. But now, she's alone, and Jake, even worse, after moving away, he tried to start fresh. But it turns out his reputation followed him. He struggled to hold down steady work. People didn't trust him. He tried to reconnect with family, but nobody wanted him back. He realized too late that he wasn't the golden boy anymore. For years, he was the one my father praised, the one who always had it easy, the one who could do no wrong. But now, he was just a man who threw away his own brother for nothing. I never spoke to him again, and I never will. The man I am today, he's nothing like the man I was a year ago. I moved to a new city. One where nobody knew my past, where I wasn't that guy anymore. I built a new career. I stopped holding myself back and went after what I really wanted. I surrounded myself with real friends. People who actually had my back, not just when it was convenient. And the biggest difference, I found love again, real love. The kind that isn't based on lies and manipulation. The kind that feels safe, steady, and honest. The kind I never thought I'd have again after Claire. And the best part, I don't compare her to my past. Because my past doesn't matter anymore. Looking back, I realize now that Claire and Jake did me a favor. They exposed themselves for who they really were before I wasted another decade with the wrong people. They thought they were taking something from me, but all they did was set me free. And if you're reading this, if you've ever been betrayed, if you're in the middle of thinking you'll never recover, listen to me, you will. You will wake up one day and realize you don't think about them anymore. You will find people who treat you better than you ever thought possible. You will look back and thank the universe for ripping them out of your life, because the best revenge is living a life they will never be a part of. And that's exactly what I'm doing.